that he's fed up of the criticism, blaming instead some egos and selfishness from his teammates. More on that later.
OK, thanks you. Talk to you later on. Chris, what's happening with the weather?
Well, Simon, as our weather turns milder over the next couple of days, we're going to get some very strong winds, so we'll be taking a closer look at that, where the worst of it's going, but also casting an eye further afield over into Norway and asking who turned out the lights.
Thank you. Talk to you later. Also coming up, a picture of health. New images from Mars show that NASA's latest mission has got off to the best of starts. Hello everyone, this is Afternoon Live, I'm Simon McCoy. The Prime Minister has hit the road today to try to muster support for her Brexit plan, with many critics saying her campaign has already stalled. She's in Northern Ireland as she starts a UK-wide push, as she insists that the UK will be able to strike trade deals around the world after Brexit. That comes after President Donald Trump suggested the withdrawal agreement sounded like a great deal for the EU and might hamper a future trade deal between the US and the UK. In another blow for Mrs May, the former Defence Secretary, Sir Michael Fallon, warned her Brexit deal is doomed. Our political correspondent Chris Mason reports.
The big Brexit vote is a fortnight away. Suddenly it feels like a general election campaign, with one candidate, the Prime Minister, and one policy, her Brexit deal. First stop for her today, Builth Wells in mid-Wales.
I'm here today at the Winter Fair at the Royal Welsh, hearing from farmers, from manufacturers, the importance of the certainty that the deal brings, the importance of the free trade area, of the ability to export, continue to export well with the European Union in the future, that we see in that political declaration for our future relationship on trade with the European Union.
But her critics are everywhere. This man, glass of water in hand, used to walk into this radio studio all the time to defend the government. Take a listen to him now.
My fear is this deal actually just gives us the worst of all worlds. No guarantee of smooth trade in the future, and no ability to reduce the tariffs that we need to conclude trade deals with the rest of the world. So unless the Commons, I think, can be persuaded somehow that those things are possible, yes, then I think the deal is doomed.
And with friends like that, the Prime Minister could do without what you're about to hear from the President of the United States. Who does he think has won in the negotiation between the UK and the European Union?
Sounds like a great deal for the EU, and I think we have to do this. I think we have to take a look at seriously whether or not the UK is allowed to trade, because, you know, right now, if you look at the deal, they may not be able to trade with us.
Downing Street insists an independent trade policy is possible under its plan, but with criticism raining down on the Prime Minister, people on all sides of this debate are now marshalling their arguments, hoping that their plan can replace hers when it's defeated. Some passionate Brexiteers say leaving the EU with no deal is fine, reckon Mrs May's vision is the worst deal in history, and are not surprised by President Trump's intervention.
He's not only pro-British, pro-Brexit, pro-believing that nation-states should make deals together, but right from day one of being elected, he saw a big, all-encompassing trade deal with the UK as being a very important thing. Firstly, for our two countries, and secondly, for him to say to everybody, I'm not protectionist, I believe in free trade when it's between countries that are equivalents.
And from those arguing for no deal to those arguing for no Brexit. Some young campaigners gathered in Westminster this morning to make their case. If you get the feeling anything could happen in the next few months, you might just be onto something. Chris Mason, BBC News.
And just to let you know, Brian Taylor, Scotland political editor for the BBC, has just said that the Scottish Government has calculated that the Prime Minister's Brexit deal could shrink the Scottish economy by £9 billion over a decade. That's equal to £1,600 per person. He says the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, said the damage was so substantial that no one in her position could accept it. Well, in a moment, we'll speak to our Ireland correspondent, Emma Vardy, but first let's go to our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young, who's in Westminster. It's not going as she would hope it is so far, is it?
No, I mean, I think Downing Street would have wanted after Sunday that moment to be a moment of national unity, if you like. I think they hoped that would swing the momentum behind Theresa May. Now, certainly there was no sign of that yesterday in that lengthy statement in the House of Commons where, yes, there was some support from her own side, but overwhelmingly across the House of Commons there was a lot of criticism. And that intervention by Sir Michael Fallon, I think is important because he was seen as a loyalist. He doesn't feel that it's a good deal, and there'll be lots of others who agree with him. I think what they need to do is just try and stop this becoming a debate, an argument about how much Theresa May is going to lose that vote by, because at the moment that's what people are talking about. They're talking about, well, if she loses it by 50, if she loses it by more than 100. I think they need to try, and get this back on track by exactly what she's doing, of course, going out to different parts of the United Kingdom, trying to illustrate to a wider audience why the deal works, she thinks, why she's ended up with that, and speaking to people who will have to deal with the repercussions of it all. So what she's going to plough on with is getting her message as she goes out there, but clearly not being helped by interventions by Sir Michael Fallon or Donald Trump. Now,
a sense of déjà vu about this one, because a lot of talk about some sort of television debate.
Yes, Theresa May wants to have a debate, but head-to-head with Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition, of course. Now, he says he would relish the opportunity. I think there are lots of issues about that, not least if you remember we spent a lot of time debating the debates in the run-up to the last election, and you could see how difficult it was to get it sorted. It's not just a matter of putting those two people on the TV at some time in the next 2 weeks. People will be looking at all sorts of issues about balance. We've already heard from MPs saying, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't really reflect the whole views and what everyone's talking about in the House of Commons, because you've got Theresa May, Jeremy Corbyn, coming from different sides of the argument, but both who went into the last election with manifestos saying that they wanted to leave the European Union. There are others, of course, in the House of Commons saying that's not the way forward. There are other options like a second referendum, for example, or something that's being talked about more and more by MPs in all parties, which is a different scenario of the UK maybe joining the European Economic Area or EFTA and adding on a customs union. So there are so many ideas knocking around about the way forward that there are some MPs who think it just wouldn't be a reflection of the debate that's being had to have Theresa May against Jeremy Corbyn. So we'll have to see where it ends up. But I think it's quite a tricky prospect.
Vicky, thank you very much. Well, let's go to Emma Vardy. The Prime Minister is in Northern Ireland. Not much of a welcome. Arlene Foster, DUP leader, saying the trip's a waste of time.
Yeah, that's right. There won't be many warm words for the Prime Minister here from the DUP, but that should be no surprise to her, because the DUP again and again have made their opposition to this deal very clear. Their problem with it, as they see it, is that this deal would kind of hive off Northern Ireland, put it into a different kind of regime from the rest of the UK if the backstop scenario were to be needed. But Theresa May won't be meeting the DUP first of all. She'll be here at Queen's University meeting students, meeting academics, where she probably is likely to get a warmer reception. But as you say, from Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party, completely different. None of Theresa May's efforts, none of her reassurances at the moment are bringing them on side. Just have a listen to the DUP leader, Arlene Foster, speaking to our political editor, Laura Koonsberg, this morning, saying that Theresa May had effectively caved in to the EU.
I think the disappointing thing for me is that the Prime Minister has given up, and she's saying this is where we are and we just have to accept that. But she may have given up on further negotiations and trying to find a better deal, but I haven't given up. I believe in a better way forward, and I believe we must find that.
And the focus very much, whilst the UK leaves one union, the fate of the other, the United Kingdom.
Yeah, that's exactly right, because if the backstop scenario was needed, the measures within the deal, this legally binding deal as it sits at the moment, are that Northern Ireland would have to continue to obey certain rules of the single market. And that is, of course, to keep it it harmonised with the Republic of Ireland so that trade can flow freely both north and south of this island. But that would in effect mean that there would be some regulatory difference between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, that border down the Irish Sea, that big red line for the DUP. And they have been pretty consistent throughout this, making their oppositions very clear, and they are absolutely not going to budge one little bit on that. And we know Theresa May's strategy, of course, is to actually, well, go over the heads of politicians, appeal to you, appeal to the public very directly. But of course it's all about the arithmetic in the House of Commons, and the DUP had provided those 10 key votes from their 10 MPs which gave her a majority. Without them she doesn't have a parliamentary majority, but of course now the numbers are looking like she has also lost the votes of many of her parliamentary colleagues in the Conservative Party as well.
Emma, for now, thank you very much. Emma Vardy there in Belfast. A bus company has been fined more than £2 million after it ignored warnings about a driver who crashed into a supermarket, killing 2 people. The Midland Red bus careered into the Sainsbury's store in Coventry 3 years ago, killing a 7-year-old boy and a pensioner. The trial heard the driver, who was 77 at the time, had mistaken the accelerator for the brake. Catherine Stancheshan reports.
The moment Kailash Chanda lost control of his double-decker bus, failing to brake, pressing hard on the accelerator instead. Seconds later, it smashed into a supermarket, killing 7-year-old Rowan Fitzgerald, who'd been sitting at the front of the top deck. 76-year-old Dora Hancocks, who'd been crossing the road that afternoon, was also killed. The court heard it was lucky more people weren't injured. Kailash Chanda was 77 at the time of the accident and was diagnosed afterwards with dementia. His driving had become increasingly erratic.
Mr. Chanda had had several previous crashes. There had been repeated complaints by customers, and just 6 months prior to the crash he had been assessed in-house. Bosses were told fatigue was affecting his driving.
On the day of the accident, Kailash Chanda had already worked a 75-hour week. He was deemed unfit to stand trial at a previous hearing. The bus company, which pleaded guilty to 2 health and safety offences, admitted their failure to act had tragic consequences.
Our own detailed policies were not followed as closely as they should have been. There were failures at an operational level in driver supervision, and we deeply regret the opportunities that were missed to act decisively on emerging warning signs.
In a statement, the Fitzgerald family said their lives have been changed forever.
We will always feel anger over the cruel and unnecessary way Rowan died. Anger at not only the driver, Kailash Chanda, but also the bus company, which we feel did not do enough to stop the driver being a danger to others.
Midland Red says it has made key changes and now has much more robust safety measures in place. But the judge said the £2.3 million fine reflects the fact that the public was put at risk not just on that day, but for months beforehand. Catherine Stancheshan, BBC News, Birmingham.
You're watching Afternoon Live. Our headlines today. Theresa May is on the road trying to rally support for her Brexit deal as she insists trade deals will still be possible. Bus company Midland Red South is fined £2.3 million for ignoring warnings about a driver who killed 2 people in a crash in 2015. 18 migrants are rescued from 2 small boats in the English Channel. It's believed one was carrying an 18-month-old child. We'll have more on that in a moment.
And in sports, the former England Rugby Union international Sam Burgess has blamed what he's called individual egos and selfish players for their early exit from the 2015 Rugby World Cup. Jose Mourinho says his Manchester United team can watch their Champions League match on telly tonight if they don't fancy the pressure of playing in front of their own fans at Old Trafford. And Johnny Bairstow has signed a short-term deal with Kerala Knights to play in the T10 League. Fresh from his man-of-the-match performance in Colombo with the England Test side, he's flying into the UAE where the tournament is taking place. And I'll have more on those stories just after 2:30.
2 boats carrying a total of 18 migrants, including an 18-month-old child, have been stopped in the Channel. They're the latest, and more than 100 people have been picked up trying to cross to the UK. Simon Jones reports now from Dover.
In the middle of the Channel, in the cold and the dark, 9 migrants, some children, found on a tiny boat. Despite repeated warnings on both sides of the Channel that people are putting their lives at risk trying to cross the busiest shipping lane in the world, it's continuing. The migrants were brought to Dover.
Well, it's unprecedented what is happening at the moment, and it's like crossing the M25 on foot during the rush hour. It is the busiest thoroughfare for shipping in the world. There's over 400 commercial shipping movements a day. They do not have lighting, they do not have experience, they've got an inadequate boat. They're very, very lucky to be alive.
The French authorities rescued another 9 migrants on a fishing boat in the early hours. The Dover lifeboat was involved in one of this morning's rescue operations, and down there beside it you can see just how small the boat on which 9 migrants were found actually is, risking their lives in the cold and the dark. Over the past month, more than 100 migrants have succeeded getting across the channel in small boats. Most have claimed to be from Iran. It's thought many have flown into Serbia after the country began offering visa-free access to Iranians to boost tourism and trade, then heading to northern France with the goal of getting to the south coast.
What we need to see is we need to see the Home Office and the French authorities working together to find these people traffickers who are behind this and stop them in their tracks before there's a tragedy in the middle of the English Channel.
The Home Office says Border Force patrols have been stepped up, but some are warning that if this continues, the rescue operations could turn into the recovery of bodies. Simon Jones, BBC News, Dover.
And he's still for us there now. And Simon, given the risks that were outlined there very graphically, they're very lucky to be alive, these people.
Very lucky to be alive, but despite the warnings we're getting both from the British and the French authorities, people are still making the perilous journey. This morning, as we've heard, 2 simultaneous rescues. One boat around 6 miles off Dover, the 9 people on board brought back to Dover, and we have heard details of who exactly was on board. We're told there were 2 separate families. There was a mother, a father and 3 of their children, then another family, a mother, father and their child, plus another man. We're told they are all claiming to be from Iraq. But seeing the boat up close that they use, it is very small, it was very much overweight, it was packed full of people, and you get a sense really in the cold and the dark of how dangerous this is.
Simon, we seem to be talking about these attempts more and more, almost one a day at the moment, and more from Iran. Why do we think that is?
Yeah, most of the migrants who have managed to get over here on small boats have claimed to be from Iran. Now, there are 2 main reasons for this, we understand. The first is that people from Iran are now allowed to travel visa-free to Serbia. The idea was to increase tourism and trade between the 2 countries. So the idea is potentially people are getting to Serbia, then using that to get to northern France, and then getting on boats to try to get across the channel. The other reason we're told by experts is that people from Iran who managed to get over here and claim asylum are not currently being forcefully deported back to Iran. It's not considered to be safe. So if people get over here and are considered having a legitimate reason to remain there, they will not be deported back to Iran.
Simon, for now, thank you very much. That's Simon Jones there in Dover. The British academic from jail in the United Arab Emirates yesterday has arrived back in Britain. Matthew Hedges was welcomed home by his wife and members of his family. The Durham University PhD student was pardoned yesterday after being sentenced to life in prison for alleged spying. This afternoon, his wife Daniela de Tejada has tweeted a picture of the couple reunited after his return. She said, "Thanks for collectively helping me to bring back my husband. We've been through hell and back, and would really appreciate having some space to catch up on much-needed rest." A police watchdog says a crisis in mental health services is putting an intolerable burden on police in England and Wales. The Inspectorate of Constabulary claims officers are being forced to respond to tens of thousands of incidents every year, which should be handled by mental health specialists. Our Home Affairs correspondent Danny Shaw reports.
He was a talented musician, but for many years Sean Rigg suffered from severe mental health problems, paranoid schizophrenia. In August 2008, he was arrested and restrained by police after reports he'd attacked people. The 40-year-old was taken to a police station, but he collapsed and died in hospital. An inquest jury said police had used an unnecessary and unsuitable level of force.
What we need is care. When somebody's been restrained, somebody's vulnerable, the excessive force that's been used that shouldn't happen. We are where we are. Police are involved in this.
The watchdog that monitors police in England and Wales says they should be far less involved in cases like this. In a report, it says officers are picking up the pieces because the mental health system is broken. The report says when mental health patients need help, 50% of the trips to hospital or a safe place are made by police, not ambulance. It takes about 3 hours for police to deal with someone who's mentally unwell. In London, 5 people with mental health problems called police 8,600 times last year, more than anyone else.
The police are called to step in out of hours when other services go home. So we see the volume of calls to police peaking at around 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening weekdays when other practitioners are going home. And we see that as other mental health services pushing the risk and demand onto the police just because they're a 24/7 service.
Police leaders have welcomed the inspection report. They say the health service must stop passing the buck.
This report must now put a full stop to everything that we've said before. There is a crisis, it needs to be dealt with, and there needs to be some action. So I completely support what's being said.
The government says it's planning to spend an extra £2 billion a year on mental health services in England and has already reduced the use of police custody for those in need. Danny Shaw, BBC News.
Now, a remarkable story. A 10-year-old boy who had a rare blood disorder has been reunited with the man who helped save his life. Rupert Cross was diagnosed 4 years ago and spent months in a specialist unit at Great Ormond Street Hospital on a course of chemotherapy. But his life was changed when a man who joined the bone marrow register because he saw a woman he liked in the queue for donors turned out to be a perfect match. A chance encounter transformed both their lives, as BBC Look East's Robbie West now reports.
So all of these I would have to have.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's why you have a gym.
I would be sick like everywhere.
Oh.
Rupert spent more than 80 days in a specialist treatment unit, diagnosed with a rare blood disorder. The 6-year-old's immune system was failing right in front of his parents' eyes.
I remember the time when his hair was falling out and I was in with a nurse and I was just stroking his hair and it was just coming out in clumps.
I would have done anything to have swapped places with him. Yeah. It's such a horrific experience.
His only option was to find a willing bone marrow donor who was a close enough genetic match. Unknown to Rupert, in Basildon, someone was about to join the register who had the potential to save his life. Billy Higgins works in a bank. A charity had set up outside and was signing up bone marrow donors. He's the first to admit his initial reasons for joining the register wasn't all about helping others.
Yeah, ended up on the register because the girl I liked was in the queue.
Due to the complexities of Rupert's condition, Billy had to have an operation to remove some of his bone marrow.
Last bit!
Rupert has gone on to make a full recovery.
They calm roots.
Billy went to Hemel Hempstead to meet Rupert and his family. He was joined by the girl that he was flirting with in the queue to become a donor. She had to come along really, seeing as now she's his wife.
Hi. How do you do? Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. How you doing, Rupert?
Good, thank you.
You alright?
Yeah. I feel very lucky. I can't believe someone has. I don't know. I can't put it into words. He's a Superman.
I'll take that one.
Rupert needed a hero, and in Billy, he got one. Robbie West, BBC News.
What a great story. No mention of Brexit. Viewers in the Look East region can see more on that story tonight at 6:30. It'll also be available later on the BBC iPlayer. And in our nationwide segment at 4:30, we'll be talking to Susie Fowler-Watt of BBC Look East and talking more about that. And don't forget, you can let us know what you think about any of the stories we're covering today. Tweet us using the hashtag #AfternoonLive. All the other ways to contact us, there they are on screen. You can text us on 61124. Now, though, let's have a look at the weather here. Now, many people complain it's a bit miserable and a bit dark in the mornings, but we know nothing Norway.
Yes, Norway, that's what we're looking at. Yeah, if you think about the time of day length that we have this time of year, of course the days are getting shorter all the time here in the UK. At its peak, in the middle of October, we lose about 5 minutes of daylight each day, which is yeah, pretty incredible. But we're going to take a look up north, if you like, to northern Norway and Tromsø, which is in the Arctic Circle. And yesterday, the day length was 1 hour 10. The difference between yesterday and today is they've lost 42 minutes of daylight. How upsetting would that be?
Well, if you drive a solar-powered anything, it's bad news. But so they what? They get an hour. They get a few minutes a day.
No, today the day length is 28 minutes, and this is it. After today, the sun won't come up again until the middle of January. Yeah, so it's 48 days of straight darkness in a row, and what a drop-off. It's just incredible, going from 1 hour 10 to 28 minutes of daylight to nothing, and it's going to be like that for the next 48 days. Anyway.
Well, that's no reason. We're a cheerful bunch here.
We are.
Because of all the sunlight we get.
And, yeah, I better get on with this.
Well,
it's running away with us already.
There's some rather unpleasant stuff coming, though, isn't there?
Yes. Change to milder weather. So temperatures stay struggling a bit, 6 or 7 degrees tomorrow. Up to 15 or so, but as we look at the weather picture today, we've got this band of rain coming in, and it's behind this band of rain that we see the milder air spreading in. So ultimately, over the next few hours, temperatures will be pushing back into double figures across southwest England and also southern parts of Wales as our wet weather pushes eastwards, staying chilly for a time. But then overnight, as the first band of rain clears through, we've got another one following from the west. Temperatures 6 to 8 degrees. It's a milder night compared with recent nights, and double figures actually towards parts of the southwest. So the change is underway. As we look at the weather picture for tomorrow, we've got this big area of low pressure working in. Tightly packed isobars targeting the western side of the UK. That's where we're going to have some strong winds. But it's also going to be a very wet day as well, with some heavy rain particularly affecting Northern Ireland and Scotland, where we could see some localised surface water flooding in the north later in the day. Windy, gusts could reach 60, maybe 70 miles an hour at times, strong enough to bring down some tree branches, so we may well get some localised transport disruption and potentially 1 or 2 power supply problems as well. Temperature-wise, we're looking at highs between 12 and 14 degrees, maybe 15 for some, but the cool air just still hanging on in the Northern Isles. It will, though, get milder here as we head into Thursday. Thursday, the low pressure is still on the scene, but we get another little one running into the UK. Now, there's some uncertainty about just how strong this area of low pressure is going to be on Thursday. Worst case scenario is we could get gusts of wind of 70 to 80 miles an hour around the western side of the UK. But that is quite uncertain. What we're more certain about is, yes, it's going to be a blustery kind of day with rain at times, some sunny spells in between, and mild. Temperatures between 10 and 14 degrees Celsius. That's Thursday's weather. We'll now have a look ahead to Friday and the weekend. And I'm afraid, although we've lost the chilly air and replaced it with milder air across many areas of the UK, we've also replaced it with rain. And there's going to be quite a lot of that through Northern Ireland, England and Wales over the next few days. In Scotland, at times, it will be a little bit cooler, a mixture here of sunny spells and passing showers. That's your latest weather.
Our World is a unique series of films on the BBC.
I want to be able to bring her home.
Offering personal insights into global events. Our World, stories that speak for themselves. Saturday and Sunday nights at 9:30 on the BBC News Channel.
This is BBC News, our latest headlines. The Prime Minister begins a tour to sell her Brexit agreement, but as it's attacked by President Trump and allies at home, she insists trade deals will be possible.
We will be able to do trade deals, to negotiate trade deals with countries around the rest of the world. And as regards the United States, we've already been talking to them about the sort of agreement that we could have in the future.
A bus company is fined £2.3 million for ignoring warnings about a driver who killed 2 people in a crash in 2015. 18 migrants are rescued from 2 small boats in the English Channel. It's believed one was carrying an 18-month-old child. Matthew Hedges, the British academic released from jail in the United Arab Emirates, returns home and thanks his wife for helping win his freedom. And a postcard from Mars. NASA's latest probe sends back its first picture of the red planet. Now, the sport here on Afternoon Live, we go to Hugh. A brief spell in rugby, and yet Sam Burgess is stirring it all up.
He is, isn't he, Simon? Yes, good afternoon to you. You might remember Sam Burgess switching codes a few years ago. Of course, this is a rugby league star at that time and still is now. It was controversial at the time, although considered a coup given his standing in the league code, but it was supported particularly by the England coach at the time, Stuart Lancaster, with very much the 2015 World Cup in mind. But when things went very badly at that tournament, they were the first host nation to not qualify from the group stage of a Rugby World Cup. Burgess was very much made a scapegoat, given how he had been brought into that England team quite so quickly. The experience made him go back to league pretty much straight after the tournament, but he is still getting criticised. He seemed to have had enough, though, particularly this morning when he responded on Twitter to some of those critics, saying this: if people actually re-watch the games I participated in, he means in the Rugby World Cup in 2015, you will see I added to the team. What cost us an early exit was individual egos and selfish players not following our leader, which essentially cost the coach, Stuart Lancaster, of course, and other great men their jobs. Tournaments are not won by the coaching staff or just one player. It takes a commitment from the full group. I guarantee you this, I was committed, but others had their own agendas. He did go on to say, Simon, that he insists he is enjoying watching the current England Rugby Union team. He's back in the England Rugby League team himself, and he wants them to do well at the next World Cup, which, of course, is next year.
Oh, how unselfish, and no ego there. Now, let's look ahead to this week. A big week for English teams in the Champions League.
Yeah, we're getting to that stage, aren't we? This is match day 5 of the 6 that we have in the group stage of the Champions League, and both Manchester clubs can make it through.
Could stop Brexit if MPs vote down the Prime Minister's deal. Ministers say the case is only hypothetical, as the government has no plans to remain in the European Union. Well, our Brussels reporter Adam Fleming explained what's behind this legal challenge.
There were 3 sides making their case here in the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg. First of all, it was the MPs, MSPs and MEPs who want to know if Article 50 can be revoked unilaterally. They say you've got to create a situation where a country could change its mind about leaving the EU, and that MPs need to know the answer to that question when they're voting on the Brexit deal. The UK government says this is all hypothetical because Theresa May has got no intention whatsoever of taking back that letter she wrote to the EU triggering Brexit in March last year. For the EU, well, they're worried about other countries using Article 50 in a tactical way. Putting in your notification of withdrawing, removing it, putting it in again, changing your mind again, all to squeeze a better deal out of the EU. Today's hearing was 4 hours long. It got pretty complicated in places, and we do not know when the judges here will make a final ruling. It could be weeks or maybe even months away.
Adam Fleming there, and we shall stay with Brexit because there is a debate about a debate, the possibility of Theresa May going on a televised debate with Jeremy Corbyn, criticism of it being down to just those two from none other than Boris Johnson, who has tweeted, "There is no point having a debate with two people who voted Remain and deals that don't take back control. Any debate must involve someone who believes in Brexit and the British people being fully in control of their laws, rather than giving back control to the EU like the PM's deal." He goes on, debates are great for democracy, but rather than widening discourse, this debate is narrowing it by offering a false choice between May's failing deal and Corbyn's vague proposals, neither of which are Brexit. That's Boris Johnson's take on the television debates that are being proposed at the moment. We'll have more on Brexit later. A health think tank is warning that thousands of cancer patients are dying unnecessarily each year because NHS England has failed to improve care quickly enough. A study by the Health Foundation found England had failed to close the gap with countries that perform better, such as Canada. Our health correspondent Nick Triggle reports.
Over the last 20 years, there have been 4 national cancer strategies. Each has promised the best care for England. But the Health Foundation said while there had been progress, the NHS was still lagging behind. Its analysis shows that only on breast cancer has the health service managed to actually close the gap with the best performing systems. The report warns the lack of progress is costing lives. Each year, 135,000 people die from cancer. But 10,000 of those could be prevented if care was as good as in the other nations.
The key problem is one of late diagnosis. people who are diagnosed late have a much less good chance of surviving 5 years than those who are diagnosed early. And so we have got to make it easier for patients to access their GP, for GPs to investigate and refer on, and for diagnostic services to be there so that people can be diagnosed in a rapid way.
The think tank wants to see better access to tests and scans to speed up diagnosis, but it said services were being undermined by a lack of staff and equipment, which is delaying how quickly patients are seen. The government has already said it aims to tackle this. Last month, the Prime Minister promised the number of cancers being diagnosed early would increase from 1 in 2 to 3 in 4 over the next 10 years, thanks to the extra funding being provided to the health service. The Department of Health and Social Care said more details would be unveiled in the long-term plan for the NHS, which is expected to be published soon. Nick Triggle, BBC News.
A study of graduate pay shows women with degrees gain more financially in their first few years of work than men do. The Institute for Fiscal Studies found that by the end of their 20s, female graduates earn 28% more than other women. For men, the difference is only 8%. Lauren Moss reports.
Choosing to go to university can be an expensive decision. The average student leaves with £50,000 of debt. For the first time, a report's examined whether graduates are later making that money back. It appears women are getting a better return on their investment. On average, by the age of 29, a female graduate earns £6,700 a year more than a woman who didn't go to university. In comparison, a man with a degree earns £2,700 a year more than a man without a degree. And the subject studied makes a big difference too, with maths, science and medicine likely to lead to better wages than the creative arts, English or philosophy.
We do see lots of men studying at institutions with 0 or negative returns by age 29. It's important to bear in mind, though, that this return is likely to grow through men's 30s, as graduate men tend to earn at a faster rate through their 30s than non-graduate men. For women, we see a large average return of around 26%. That does vary, but it's a pretty consistently positive story for women.
These figures are only a snapshot of average earnings at the age of 29. They don't look into how what may happen next in life could have an impact, such as how if a woman has children, that could affect her income, and how male graduates tend to earn more later on. Some students think the findings may affect what people choose to study.
Obviously there are quite a lot of degrees out there that aren't as employable.
I think it should impact people's choices if money is something that drives you.
Maybe people, are discouraged going to study art or like literature, but I feel like, it's really sad to think about.
The government is to review university tuition fees. The focus will turn to which institutions offer the best value for money.
A good degree would be worth the investment. What I want to see is universities competing to offer the best quality value for money degrees to our young people.
As students prepare to send off their UCAS applications early next year, questions will continue to be asked about how well prepared they'll be for life after university. Lauren Moss, BBC News.
Now, scientists at NASA say they're beginning to gather data from Mars after successfully landing a probe on the surface of the planet yesterday. The InSight spacecraft has already begun to send its first images back. Our science reporter Victoria Gill sent this report from Mission Control in Pasadena in California.
Touchdown confirmed.
Relief and joy at Mission Control. After plunging through the Martian atmosphere at 6 times the speed of a bullet, NASA's InSight spacecraft safely planted its feet on the surface of Mars. Now the science begins.
It's going to be a really busy 2 or 3 months for us. I'm really hoping that the energy I'm feeling today is going to carry me through those next few months, because it's going to be needed. But when we get our first Marsquake, we're going to get a bunch of images over the next few days, and it's just incredible to be on this mission and to say, tomorrow when I come on shift, I'm going to see an image of Mars that no one has ever seen before.
And it's already sending snapshots back to Earth. InSight's cameras will examine its surroundings in detail so scientists can select exactly where to place its scientific equipment. It'll listen for Martian earthquakes and drill deep into the planet to study its inner structure.
As the InSight lander studies the deep interior of Mars robotically, it'll be sending its data back here to Mission Control at NASA in California. And the people here will use that data to work out exactly how rocky worlds like Earth, Mars and the Moon actually formed 4.5 billion years ago. They lovingly call this the centre of the universe.
The 2-year mission is now underway to build a picture of the hidden depths of the red planet. Victoria Gill, BBC News at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, California.
And back on Earth, sort of. Mariam is here.
Except in my mind.
We won't go there. There isn't time.
Don't.
Anyway, the headlines from her in just a moment. But first, let's bring you our headlines here on Afternoon Live. Theresa May tours the nations, trying to rally public support for her Brexit deal as it's criticised by allies at home and abroad. A bus company has fined more than £2 million for ignoring warnings about a driver who killed 2 people. 18 migrants, including a toddler, are rescued from 2 small boats in the English Channel.
Hello everyone, your business headlines on Afternoon Live. Donald Trump has suggested Theresa May's Brexit agreement could threaten a US-UK trade deal. The US president told reporters the withdrawal agreement sounds like a great deal for the EU and meant the UK might not be able to trade with the US. More on that shortly. UK and Dutch regulators have fined ride-sharing service Uber for a breach that exposed the details of 57 million customers and drivers. The Information Commissioner's Office fined the company £385,000, while the Dutch Data Protection Authority imposed a fine of €600,000. And Cook has warned that annual profits are set to come in £30 million lower than expected, and they blame the summer heatwave. It's the second profit warning the firm has issued in 2 months. Earnings were £88 million lower in the year to September as people delayed booking holidays because of the prolonged heatwave at home.
Now, not that he's used to causing any controversy, but President Trump has been talking this time about the deal proposed by Theresa May. And it's
not quite what Prime Minister May needed, to be honest with you. Remember when President Obama said the UK would join the back of the queue in terms of any trade deal with the US? Well,
he's now going, what trade deal? President
Trump is basically saying, what trade deal? You can't do a trade deal with us during your transition period with the EU. And, you know, if you look at the details, that is actually, he does have a point, because we'll be connected to the European Union. There won't be any way to do a trade deal with the US. However,
he says it's a great deal.
It's a great deal. It's very unhelpful
for the EU.
For the EU,
yeah.
Exactly. He said a great deal for the EU. And he said that it wouldn't be a good thing if the UK could not do a trade deal with the US. And all this is wholly unhelpful for Prime Minister May as she tries to...
Well, she's been denying it.
Persuade. Well, they have been denying it, and they've been saying, you know, things are going to work out just fine. They will be fine. We'll be able to trade. But of course, there are no details on that within the withdrawal agreement. So, what do the US make of it? What do Americans make of it?
I don't know, but
what do
Samira
investors...
might.
That's my line, Simon. Please don't steal my line, OK? What does America make of it? What does the US make of it? What does Samira make of it? You see, I do it so much better. Samira, do I do it better or not? Your life depends on this answer.
You do indeed. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm on your team. Absolutely.
Thank you. So, from Team Mariam to Team Samira, this is another hugely controversial thing for the President of the United States to say. It doesn't help Prime Minister May in the slightest. What is he thinking?
So this certainly doesn't come at the best time for the Prime Minister. Like, remember, these are comments that have come from the President as he was boarding to go depart and do an event in another part of the United States. And reporters are throwing a lot of questions at him during this time. So there's not really a lot of time to be able to get into very much detail when asking about this question. But he did say that, look, he doesn't think it's a very good deal, and he did cast some doubt on whether or not the U.S. and the U.K. are going to be able to come out with some sort of trade deal. But remember, this is a president that has often criticized the